Good evening, my friends, and welcome back. My name is Lizzie Bishop. Some of you know me as the old woman who tells stories in the dark, stories that aren't just make-believe, but whispers taken from real lives, lived on lonely highways and in forgotten corners of America. At my age, I've seen enough nights to know this. The world after midnight is not the same world you walk through in daylight. Shadows behave differently. People behave differently. And sometimes, the road itself seems hungry, waiting for someone unlucky enough to break down at the wrong mile marker. Tonight, I have a story for you. It comes from a man named David Parker, a young soul who thought his late-night drive through the northern backroads of this country would be just another tiresome journey. But the road had other plans for him, plans involving a stranger's grin, a woman's silent terror, and a set of eyes burning from the back seat, where no one was supposed to be. So lean in closer, turn down the lights, and listen carefully, because this is not a campfire tale to make children scream. This is what happens when evil disguises itself in kindness, and the only thing standing between you and disappearance is instinct. It's a late September night, and the northern air is sharp enough to sting your lungs. David Parker, 27 years old, has been driving since sunrise. The final scraps of his old life are packed into the trunk of his sedan, a battered suitcase, a box of old books, and a lamp with a broken shade. He is tired, but determined. This was the last trip. By morning, he would be finished with the long haul from the West Coast to the new town where his future waited. The highway he chose was not the one most people would take. It wasn't lined with diners glowing in neon or gas stations every 20 miles. No, David's road cut through the forgotten veins of America, two-lane blacktop weaving between endless walls of pine and birch. Out here, the forest pressed so close, it seemed to breathe, and when you looked out the window, it was as though the trees were leaning in, curious about who dared to pass their way at this hour. By 10 o'clock, the road was empty. No headlights ahead, no red tail lights behind. Just David, the endless asphalt, and the occasional flicker of a dim streetlight. He tried the radio, but it was all static. He hummed to himself, tapping the wheel, pretending he wasn't alone in 100 miles of darkness. But the thing about loneliness is, it grows heavier the longer you notice it. That's when the trouble started. First, a light flicker on his dashboard, just one warning light. He ignored it. The car was old. Warning lights were its second language. Then another light appeared. And another, a trio glowing red and orange like the eyes of something alive, something watching. The steering wheel stiffened under his grip. David frowned, trying to keep the car steady as it drifted slightly to the right. The tires felt like they were dragging through mud, though the pavement was smooth. He muttered under his breath, knuckles white on the wheel. Not now, not here. But the car had other plans. The hum of the engine faltered, coughing once, then twice. With a sickly shudder, it gave up. The headlights dimmed, the power steering groaned, and the vehicle rolled to a reluctant stop on the gravel shoulder. And then, nothing. David sat in the sudden stillness, staring at the lifeless dashboard. He could hear the night now, the wind threading through the trees, the faint creak of branches swaying against one another. Even his own breathing sounded too loud. He reached for his phone. No service. The screen mocked him with a hollow, no signal message. He lowered it slowly, heart sinking as the reality took hold. He was stranded. To his left, the forest stretched into blackness, swallowing even the moonlight. To his right, the same endless curtain of trees. No houses, no lights, not even the chirp of crickets now, as though the woods themselves were holding their breath. David stepped out of the car, gravel crunching beneath his boots. The air was colder than he expected, damp with the smell of wet pine. He glanced under the hood, though he knew nothing about engines. A small puff of steam escaped, ghost-like in the beam of his phone flashlight. Nothing obvious was broken, but then again he wouldn't have recognized it if it was. The road was empty, stretching forward and back like a ribbon into infinity. He thought about walking, but an hour's drive in either direction meant miles, miles through dark woods where no one would hear him if something went wrong. So he did the only thing that made sense. He leaned against the hood of his useless car, crossing his arms, staring down the road. Maybe, just maybe, someone would pass. 15 minutes crawled by. His breath fogged in the air, fading quickly into the night. The silence pressed tighter, almost suffocating. Then, at last, a pair of headlights appeared on the horizon. David's shoulders sagged with relief. He waved his arms, stepping out into the road. The beams grew larger, brighter, until a dark sedan slowed and pulled to the shoulder beside him. Inside, a man sat with a cigarette glowing between his fingers. He looked to be mid-30s, face rough, eyes sharp and darting. He sized David up in silence before speaking. "Car trouble?" His voice was casual, but the way he said it, flat, deliberate, as if he already knew the answer. David explained quickly, something about the engine, about needing a lift to the next town. The man nodded slowly, smoke curling from his lips. Then came the pause, too long of a pause. His gaze flicked to the rear view mirror once, twice, as though checking something David couldn't see. Finally he smirked and said, "Why don't you hop in? I'll get you where you need to go." Something in David's stomach twisted. It wasn't the offer itself. It was the way the man leaned on it, like a spider inviting a fly into its web. Every instinct screamed at him to say no, and here is where the night began to turn. Because in that moment, David Parker had to make a choice: accept the ride or trust his fear. The glow of the man's cigarette was the only warm color in that stretch of black highway. His face, partly lit by the ember, looked worn, but not in a kind way, more like someone who had spent too many nights watching and waiting. His eyes never softened, not even when he offered the ride. They stayed sharp, scanning David the way a hunter sizes up a deer. David hesitated. Everything practical inside him whispered that he should accept. After all, who knew when another car would pass? He could be out here all night, cold and alone, with no way to call for help. Logic said to get in. But instinct screamed otherwise. The pause stretched between them. The man finally chuckled, low and hollow, as if amused by David's silence. "Come on, Tutsti," he said. "Don't be shy. Next town's not far. Safer than standing out here in the dark, right?" The words were friendly enough, but the tone carried an edge, like a command disguised as kindness. And then there was the way he kept glancing into his mirrors, quick and nervous, like he was worried someone or something might be catching up to them. David's mouth was dry. He forced a polite smile and shook his head. "I appreciate it, but my buddy's already on his way. Should be here any minute. Just waiting him out." The man's smirk froze. His jaw shifted, tightening before he leaned back into his seat. "Is that so?" he said quietly. "Funny. Haven't seen another car on this road in miles." David held his ground. "Yeah, he knows the area. Won't be long." For a moment the man's eyes locked on his, and David felt a chill crawl down his spine. Then the cigarette flicked out the window. sparks scattering on the gravel. Without another word, the man shifted gears. The sedan rolled forward and melted back into the night, its tail lights shrinking until they disappeared into the trees. David stood alone again, his heart pounding. Relief washed over him, but it was shallow, uneasy. He had trusted his gut, and maybe it saved him. Still, he couldn't shake the image of that smirk, the way it seemed to say, "You'll regret this." And as the silence returned, heavier than before, David realized the night had only just begun. An hour passed. An hour of standing in the dark, leaning against the cold steel of his useless car. David's legs ached, and the damp night air had crept into his bones. No headlights appeared on the horizon, no comforting sign of life, just the black road stretching forward and back, endless, indifferent. He told himself he had done the right thing, that refusing the stranger's ride had spared him from something far worse than a night stranded. But the longer he stood alone, the more doubt gnawed at him. What if that had been his only chance? What if no one else came? And then, just when his eyelids grew heavy and resignation set in, he saw it, a glow cresting the bend. Headlights. Relief surged through him. He stepped out into the road again, waving his arms. The car slowed. As it pulled up, David blinked. It looked familiar, a dark sedan just like the one before. His stomach clenched, but as the window rolled down, he realized this was different. Behind the wheel sat a young woman, maybe in her late 20s. Her hair was unkempt, her face pale under the glow of the dashboard. "Need some help?" she asked, her voice soft, almost apologetic. Her smile was thin, nervous, like someone forcing themselves to play a part. David hesitated, his instincts pricking at him once more. But the exhaustion in his body, the ache in his legs, the hopelessness of the empty road, all of it pushed him forward. He forced a smile back. "Yeah, my car's dead. Just need a ride to the next town, anywhere with a gas station." She gave a quick nod and leaned across to unlock the passenger door. "Get in. I'll take you." David opened the door and slid inside. The interior smelled faintly of old smoke and something else he couldn't place, something metallic, sharp. He buckled the seatbelt, stealing a glance at her. Her hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, knuckles pale. Her eyes never strayed from the road ahead. "Thank you," David said, trying to ease the tension. "I don't know what I would have done out there all night." She didn't answer. Her lips pressed into a thin line. The only response was a brief flicker of her eyes in the mirror, then back to the road, as if she hadn't really heard him. The silence between them was different from before. It wasn't the silence of two strangers without words. It was heavy, deliberate. And the more David studied her profile, the way her jaw trembled slightly, the way her breathing came quick and shallow, the more he realized this woman wasn't calm. She was afraid. But of what? Or of who? David turned his gaze forward, heart sinking with a realization he couldn't quite name yet. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and soon he would understand why. The road stretched on, endless strips of black asphalt disappearing beneath the tires. David sat stiffly in the passenger seat, trying to ignore the strange quiet pressing in around them. The woman still hadn't spoken since he thanked her. Her eyes were wide, locked on the road as though it took all her strength just to keep driving straight. David shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the dashboard clock. They'd been driving nearly 20 minutes in silence. At last, he spotted a road sign through the darkness. "Gas station, 2 miles." His chest loosened. "There it is," he said, voice relieved. "You can drop me off up ahead. Thank you, really. You've been a lifesaver tonight." She gave a tiny nod, but didn't look at him. Her hands clenched tighter around the wheel. For the first time, David saw her eyes flick toward him, quick, nervous, and then dart back to the road. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't even politeness. Her look carried something else, something closer to desperation. And then, in the corner of his vision, movement. David froze. Slowly, he turned his head toward the rearview mirror. There, a figure sat hunched in the shadows of the back seat, pressed low as if trying to remain unseen. The shape straightened, lifting its head, and in that moment the dim glow from the gas station sign outside brushed across his face. David's blood turned cold. It was the man. The same one who had stopped earlier, the one who smirked when David refused his offer. His eyes, now lit for just a second, were filled with rage. David's throat went dry. He whipped forward again, breath caught in his chest. His mind scrambled for words, for reason, for escape. The woman's grip on the wheel trembled. Her lips parted just slightly, but no sound came out. She didn't have to say it. David understood now. She wasn't the rescuer. She was the prisoner. The man leaned closer, his voice a low growl from behind. Smart of you not to take my ride before, but not smart enough. David's pulse pounded in his ears. The gas station loomed just ahead, its fluorescent lights bleeding into the darkness like a beacon. But the car wasn't slowing down. In that instant, David knew. If he didn't act now, the night would swallow him whole. The glow of the gas station grew brighter, humming with pale fluorescent light. David fixed his eyes on it like a drowning man spotting the shore. But the car kept its pace, 50 miles an hour, speeding past the open turn. His heart crashed against his ribs. "Turn in here," he said sharply, pointing toward the pumps. His voice cracked with urgency. The woman's lips pressed tight, trembling. She flicked her eyes toward him, then back to the road. Her fear was plain now. Her whole body shook as though every nerve was on fire. From the back seat, the man barked, "Keep driving." His voice was cold, commanding. "Don't even think about stopping." David turned, meeting the man's furious glare. His fists were clenched, his posture leaning forward as if ready to spring. Every instinct told David that if the car passed that gas station, there would be no second chance. He locked eyes with the woman again, speaking quickly but firmly. "You don't have to listen to him. He can't hurt you if we stop here. Please, this is it. This is our chance." Her hands trembled harder. Her breathing grew uneven. And then, in a single desperate decision, she wrenched the wheel. The sedan screeched as it swerved violently off the road, tires screaming against the gravel shoulder. She slammed the brakes, the car lurching forward until it skidded to a halt, just feet away from the pumps. David's door flew open before the tires even stopped spinning. He stumbled out, shouting at her, "Go, now!" She bolted too, yanking her door open and running across the pavement. Behind them, the man roared in fury, climbing into the driver's seat. David barely had time to look back before the sedan tore away from the lot, its taillights vanishing into the black highway once more. Inside the gas station, the clerk looked up in shock as the two of them burst through the door, both pale, breathless, trembling. "Call the police," David gasped. "Now." The woman collapsed against the counter, tears streaking down her face. Between sobs, she managed to speak. "He made me pick him up. He said if I didn't, he'd—" She choked on the words, unable to finish. The clerk didn't hesitate. A phone was in his hand within seconds. David pressed his palms against the counter, forcing himself to steady his breath. His whole body still vibrated with adrenaline, the echo of those hateful eyes burning into his memory. they had escaped. But the truth was undeniable. If she hadn't chosen that moment to turn, neither of them would have survived the night. The gas station felt like a fragile island of light in the middle of an endless ocean of darkness. David and the woman clung to it, both trembling as the clerk relayed their frantic words to the dispatcher. Minutes crawled by like hours. Every sound made David flinch. The hum of the cooler, the buzz of the fluorescent lights, even the distant creak of the station's old sign swaying in the wind. He kept his eyes on the windows, half expecting the black sedan to circle back, to come roaring across the lot with its headlights blazing. But it never came. Instead, the wail of sirens finally pierced the silence, growing louder, closer, until two cruisers pulled into the lot. Red and blue lights splashed against the glass. Relief washed over David, but it was tangled with a raw fear that refused to fade. The officers listened as both he and the woman poured out their story. The breakdown, the first encounter, the silent ride. The man crouched in the back seat. Her voice shook as she described how he had forced her to stop for David, how he threatened her if she didn't keep driving. The cops exchanged grim looks. "We'll put out an alert for the vehicle," one said. "Dark sedan, male, mid-30s. You two did the right thing getting here." David glanced at the woman. She sat on a plastic chair near the counter, hands still trembling in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor. She looked like someone who had just stepped out of a nightmare, but wasn't convinced she was awake yet. An officer crouched beside her, speaking softly. "You're safe now. He can't hurt you here." Safe. The word echoed in David's head. It should have felt solid, reassuring. But as he looked out at the endless black road beyond the glow of the station lights, he realized something chilling. The man was still out there, still driving, still hunting. Maybe he would be caught. Maybe he would vanish into another stretch of empty highway, waiting for the next unlucky soul. David shivered at the thought. That night taught him something he would never forget. Sometimes, danger doesn't hide in the shadows of the forest or in the howling of the wind. Sometimes it smiles at you from the driver's seat of a stranger's car, offering a ride you should never take. And though the police presence filled the lot, though the woman finally breathed a little easier, David knew the memory of those burning eyes in the rearview mirror would haunt him for the rest of his life. Remember this, my friends. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it smiles, offers kindness, and waits for you to trust it. Out there on the dark roads, instinct may be the only shield you have. If you felt a chill listening tonight, let me know. Like, share, and subscribe, so I can bring you more stories that linger long after the lights go out.